Hi, welcome everybody to Industries Live. We appreciate your joining us and taking a 60 minutes of your life to learn more about what is happening with a few of our partners in financial services. I'm Dr. Karen Hildebrand. I am a leader of our Partner Solution Architects team. Partner Solutions Architects work with our partners to help them build their innovative solutions on AWS. And I'm responsible for our Partner Solutions Architects that are aligned to specific industries, including financial services, healthcare and life sciences, telecommunications, media, entertainment, games, and sports. And I am joined today by my co-host, Addy. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Hey, everyone. I'm Addy Dubhashi. I lead our financial services partner solutions team, and we focus on taking those industry solutions out to market with our partners. So I'm really excited today because we're going to dive into several topics, including AI, financial fraud, payments, and so on. But this is a great opportunity for you as listeners to learn about how our partners come together with AWS to solve for those industry challenges, bringing ready solutions that can help you accelerate. So I'm ready to dive in.
Well, I want to say, as anybody that has joined Industries Live before, I'm clearly not at the location I usually am. And if anybody can identify based on the background where you think I'm doing this takeover from, that'd be amazing. But also drop in the chat where you're joining us from. We love seeing what location is represented on our live stream, and we will shout out as many as we can throughout the stream. Also, make sure you drop your questions in the chat. This is interactive, we're live on purpose so that we can actually ask your questions of our guests today. So with that, let's get started and bring our first guest on screen. Hey, Malcolm, great to have you. Would you be willing to give us a 60-second intro of yourself?
60 seconds is a long time, but absolutely. It's great to be here with you and Addy at AWS Live. So my name's Malcolm deMayo. I am responsible for the banking industry, all things banking at NVIDIA, and have been in the financial services industry through technology firms for my entire career. I am hailing from just north of New York City in New Canaan, Connecticut, and I have my two favorite New York City places, Grand Central Terminal and the beautiful building. So very nice to be here and looking forward to this conversation.
Super great. And somebody in the chat already guessed that I'm in Seattle. So nice work on whoever put in the Great Pacific Northwest, unless that is where they're also joining from. So either way, they figured it out. So we have some representation from the West Coast here. So I'm excited to see whether we have any East Coasters that are nearer to Malcolm and around the world. So keep dropping in where your location is. So Malcolm, can you tell us a little bit more about the work that NVIDIA is doing in banking? Because clearly everybody that is listening here is not necessarily familiar with NVIDIA's what you're building, what it is that NVIDIA is bringing. We are all thinking GPU, and we'd love for you to help us understand how we should expand that thinking.
Yeah, so that's what everybody thinks. So let me start by introducing NVIDIA a little bit, Karen. Thanks for that. NVIDIA had a very humble beginning. Our three founders started us in a Denny's in 1993, literally a Denny's in San Jose, and there's a plaque it's still there, and there's a plaque over the bench or the table they sat at saying, this is where NVIDIA was founded. So very cool beginning, but there's nothing humble about our mission. And our mission is to create a new type of compute. So in 1964, maybe this is the best way to do it, IBM released something called the 360 architecture. And for the last, I don't know how many decades, 7 decades, 8 decades, this is what we've used in all industries. So if you think about it, there was this concept called Moore's Law. I can get more performance with every new processor without having to change a single line of code. Very useful in business, and especially in banking, where time to market matters, and being able to deliver services for less money or lowering the cost of delivering services is critical. So, but Moore's Law has kind of petered out. It's kind of been ridden into the ground. I wouldn't say it's dead, but I would say that it's the cost of cramming more transistors onto a wafer is just gotten a little crazy. And so what Jensen Huang, our founder and CEO, the idea that they sketched out on a napkin at that Denny's in 1993 was to create accelerated compute. And accelerated compute is a 3-layer cake. The base layer is hardware. Like you mentioned, a GPU. What is a GPU? It's a graphic processor unit. And the difference between a GPU and a CPU is a CPU executes one instruction at a time, and a GPU executes thousands of instructions at a time. So we speed things up. That's what we do. And that's what these guys thought of. And so when you think of NVIDIA, think of an amazingly innovative company. We acquired a company called Mellanox for, I think, $7 billion a few years ago. We are now one of the largest providers of networks, believe it or not. We acquired last year a company called Run AI for $700 million. This company gives you a control plane that you can expand from your on-premise data center in banking to cloud, so that you can control and expand your AI footprint. And this is really important. You know, banking is only 15% in cloud today, even though they all want to get there. They all want to get to cloud. They are straddled with 60, 70, 80, sometimes 100 years of technical debt. So depending on the age of the bank, like for example, Bank of New York, oldest bank in America, 240 years old. So they have a lot of challenges around that. We in addition to acquiring them, and by the way, last year we also acquired Gretel. Gretel is a really cool company. They enable companies to create synthetic data. So this is data about you. This is essentially taking data that's highly regulated in the banking industry, and you can mimic it and create synthetic versions of it. Why is this important? So now if I want to move a workload or test a workload in AWS, I have to get permission to move the data there if it's not there. You might as well try to get the Pope to give you an annulment, all right? I mean, it's just not going to happen. So at the end of the day, being able to mimic your data in cloud is what Gretel enables. And so this is now part of our platform. So incredibly innovative from an acquisition perspective. From an investment perspective, we've invested billions of dollars into all the model builders like Cohere, Mistral, Anthropic, OpenAI, you name it. We've alongside of AWS very often made these massive investments so that these companies can continue to innovate at the pace that we're seeing in the marketplace. And then lastly, from an innovation perspective, we spent close to $10 billion last year in R&D. So how do we build this 3-layer cake? It's by spending money in R&D and having world-class engineers capable of designing chips, designing software, and writing software, and building development frameworks. So the first layer of our architecture is hardware, the second layer is software, and the third layer are development frameworks, so that you have a tightly integrated, accelerated compute platform that delivers AI training and inference at the lowest cost. Why is that? And so what's really important to understand is that we do not build finished products. This platform's embedded into our partners' tech stacks and our customers' tech stacks. So you think about banks. I mentioned Bank of New York, 240 years old, but if they've had 6 decades since that IBM announcement of tech debt, it's very difficult to swap these things out. And often a large bank is built through acquisition. So you might have an elegant front-end mobile app, an elegant front-end online app, but the back end is still 5 different core banking systems that were written in 1960, 1970, 1980, right? In COBOL, probably. And so what we're enabling is you can embed this platform into the existing tech stack and start building AIs that can access your data, can generate synthetic data to train the AIs, and you can start using that Run AI control plane, start expanding out to public cloud. So that's a quick overview of who NVIDIA is. So what we're doing together with our good partner AWS in banking is trying to solve the world's biggest problems. That's our mission, right? It's how can we solve the biggest problems in the world, things that you couldn't solve before. And one of them, without a doubt, is fraud. Maybe I'll just pause for a second before I jump into that.
Yeah, Malcolm, before we dive into fraud, you absolutely called out that full recap, right? 1993, as it all started out, 2006 with CUDA coming in, y'all really shaped the heart of parallel processing. And NVIDIA's always been heavily investing in that research, just like AWS. And we've really been integrating and innovating together. Some of the areas that we've really seen customers come together when it comes to parallel processing has gone across all of the financial services use cases. So, before we dive into fraud, we've seen activity around trade and portfolio risk. We've seen working with you around organizational mortgage approval processes and the risk management systems around those. These are massive parallel compute workloads. And AWS has always been at the heart of figuring out these workloads, helping customers seamlessly move them to the cloud and then scale and elastically kind of access the compute they need. But I'm really curious, what are some of those use cases and conversations you're having today? Because we're engaged at several large institutions. We're engaging at fintechs together. We share references as wide as Perplexity and as narrow as very specialized banks. So, really keen on getting a little bit of what you're hearing from your banking customers in terms of themes. What are their priorities? And I would love to kind of share some of our
Sure.
as well.
Happy to do that. So there's a bunch of common use cases that every banking institution is experimenting with or actually using today. And I like to break it into three categories, Addy, because it's in the DNA of banks, and this is a good discipline, by the way, a very good discipline. They are so focused on return on investment and value to the client before they fund a project. All right, that if someone raises up an AI project, it's going to be competing with 25, 30, 50 other things trying to get funded in the bank. So you've got to have a good story. And one of the areas that has been completely adopted is code generation. If you'll hear people talk about co-pilots ad nauseum, but basically we do this at NVIDIA. I'm sure AWS is doing this as well. We have 2/3 of our engineers are software developers, and they are working side by side with subordinate AI co-pilots, if you will, to write code with them. And essentially, we're hearing anywhere from 20 to 40% productivity improvements. And so when you think about use cases, think about in terms of how can this improve productivity? How can this reduce or drive efficiency, cost efficiency? And how can this technology create more revenue opportunities? So those are the three big value drivers in banking. It's improving productivity, lowering or improving cost efficiency, and generating revenue. So in that productivity category is code generation. In the efficiency, everyone is racing today. Every bank is racing today to try to get their arms around agentic AI. It's the buzz of, it's the new evolving buzz. But why is because banks have thousands, if not millions, of manual processes across the enterprise. And if you can have agents trained to do a specific task, and do it well, and do it 7/24, never sleep, never eat, and be able to work in coordination with one another. Massive opportunity to improve cost efficiency and get your people out of the drudgery of repetitive, tedious, tiresome tasks, right? I think that was pretty cool right there. Tedious, tiresome tasks, all right? Pretty good alliteration. Anyway, if we jump back to what we're discussing, AI, not English. A great example at GTC, our GTC Developers Conference back in March in San Jose, Capital One, which basically is a rarity because Capital One happens to have been able to move 100% or close to it of their operations to cloud, and they operate in AWS together with AWS and NVIDIA. We worked with them to help them build what they're calling Chat Concierge. Chat Concierge is an auto navigator. Think about this. This is a very clever use of agentic AI. When you go to buy an automobile, and as an American, maybe the second most important acquisition you'll make outside of a house is an automobile. Most expensive, I mean, not important, but expensive, right? And what do we do when we think about going to buy a car? We go online, we scour, from one company to another, what's available out there, where's the inventory, what are the prices, do the blue book comparisons, and you build a spreadsheet, at least I do, nerdy, but of all these comparisons, right? So what did Chat Concierge do? What did Capital One do? Their AI team partnered with their auto team, their auto finance team, and they created an agentic workflow. And there's basically, think of it as 4 agents. There is an agent that needs to learn how to understand what the customer's looking for. Not an easy thing to do. So, married men have been trying to understand their wives for millennia, right? And now we're trying to teach an AI to understand a human. The second agent is a planner or an orchestrator. This is the agent that's going to make sure that everyone's all the agents are staying in their swim lane and doing what they're supposed to when they're supposed to. The third agent's an evaluator. This is the agent that's out doing what we normally do, right? Building that spreadsheet. And then creating a recommendation. And then the last is the explainer. This is probably as tough as the understander, right? Now you've got to go explain to the customer the recommendation and get their approval to act. So this is what Capital One has built. Think about this. You're now giving your customer, if a customer wants to engage with the Auto Navigator Chat Concierge at 2 a.m, they can. All right. If they want to figure out, where's the most cost-effective Tesla to buy, or the most cost-effective, Ford Mustang or whatever, Jeep Wrangler, this platform, this agentic platform can help them do that. Very clever by Capital One in terms of making one of the most, something that everybody hates, buying a car. Most people hate doing this. They've taken it and made it easy for their clients. And in addition to that, they're gathering all sorts of information to understand how to do this even better down the road. So
do you think it will explain to me why my 16-year-old just keeps sending me different cars that he would like to buy? Will it have that level of an explainer? Because that would be epic.
Maybe down the road.
There you go. I love it.
After a few iterations of learning. Yeah.
Exactly, right? I think that's a terrific example of how they've actually thought about an end-to-end customer experience and navigated what that process looks like inside the bank to what that looks like from a customer experience and making that a differentiator. That is a fantastic example that I think I'm going to repeat several times. So this video is now going to get clipped into just talking about that component. But it's really interesting as you've been talking, at least in the green room, and as we've been meeting before, about all the different ways in which customers are thinking about innovating and coming up with new workflows. We were going to talk a lot about fraud here. So let's take a pivot and talk about what fraud detection looks like and what you're seeing in that space. I'm particularly interested, as we were talking offline beforehand. I used to run the credit card segment at Target before coming to multiple steps along my career path. But it's really interesting when you think about what that looks like from merchants' experience and what they're willing to do as a trade-off. And then similarly, if you have to put yourself in that customer's shoes, what that experience feels like emotionally. So could you tell us a little bit more about what you're seeing in fraud and what the trends are?
Yeah, so thank you, Karen. Fraud is, so the way I like to say this, if you go back to productivity, improve efficiency or generate revenue, right? It's really about how can this use case help drive one or more of those value drivers for a bank? And when you think of fraud, the fastest way to make money is to lose less. Fraud today, credit card fraud in particular, there's lots of frauds, but credit card fraud in particular, let's define it, right? This is when someone is impersonating you. typically online where a card is not present, and they're acquiring things using your credit. And it's first and foremost, it's illegal. It's theft. It's identity theft. And on all accounts, you feel completely, it's just a bad thing. So credit card fraud, by the experts, they believe that this will, or the estimates rather, that by next year, this will be a $43 billion global problem. So, factor over 10 years, that's over $400 billion lost to fraud. Now, that's just the real fraud. Banks have to invest heavily in their contact centers to manage disputes. So it's very often, my favorite example is friendly fraud or friendly disputes. So this is where, a mom or dad call up and say, I didn't make this transaction, only to learn that their son or daughter in college did, right? And very often banks will write that off because they don't have the intelligence in their model, and managing that customer experience and keeping their customer satisfied it trumps the $25 or $30 they write off. So fraud gets very expensive. Friendly fraud gets very expensive. But even beyond that, to your point, to your question, the transactions that are legitimate that get declined, these aren't fraud. These are just false declines. This is approaching $100 billion a year globally. So that's revenue lost by merchants. That's fees, interchange fees lost by banks. And probably the most important part of this is that emotional piece. The cardholder is going to 40 to 50% of the time move your card to the bottom of their, 40 to 50% of the time, they're going to actually change banks. They're going to leave you. They're going to leave you because of the emotional experience of being a legitimate customer with good credit and having been declined. And we talked about it. Imagine yourself. This isn't an online purchase, but imagine yourself in the grocery store or in a department store, and your transactions declined. How humiliating that is, standing there in line. It's an awful feeling. Beyond the 40 to 50%, studies show that 25% more of the people will just move the card to the bottom of their wallet. So it's very expensive. It's $200 for a bank to acquire a new credit card customer. And the hope is that, and one of the reasons they're willing to spend, that's a lot of money, to spend that is the engagement with you as a credit card customer is amazing. It helps the bank understand you and how to serve you better. All of that investment in knowledge is gone because you declined a legitimate transaction. The lifetime value of the customer's lost. That has to be removed from the bank's TAM, or total available market, right? So it's a big problem. So,
and I bet we all have that card that we have at the back of our wallet. I know I certainly do. As you were describing that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. I know exactly which one that is, because I know that its fraud rate is going to hit much more frequently than my primary one. So I think that's a really great example of that change in behavior that you see from a consumer just based on the impact of a fraud model.
And there was a fascinating report that called out it's going to be $3 billion of fraud. So these are extremely sizable volumes that are at risk here, and these large institutions are looking to be on top of it. They need to have that level of speed and parallel processing and that context. And some of the work, Malcolm, I think we've done together between our teams has been on kind of really constructing for that high speed performant approach that can help detect it. We've been innovating and kind of prototyping with synthetic data and graph neural networks, and would love to kind of know more. But it's been a fascinating exercise as part of the partnership to build that industry use case.
Just very, think about it very from a very basic sense. The first frauds in the area that banks have been using technology for a very long time, starting out with rules-based systems, thousands of rules, and then starting to add in what we call traditional AI or machine learning. And when you think about it, it's identifying patterns. So knowing that, Addy, you buy your coffee at Starbucks on the corner of blah, blah, every morning between 6 and 7. And when you vary from that, it's a red flag, right? And people are, sort of creatures of habit. So banks have been very successful. And when you think about this workflow, you have a second and a half or 1,500 milliseconds to process a transaction and to give an authorization back to the merchant. So essentially, you've got about 20, 30 seconds to create a fraud score. 20, 30 milliseconds, excuse me, to create a fraud score. And so it's not a lot of time. And so what we've done is we've worked together with our experts, our AI experts, to create graph neural nets. Well, what's a graph? A graph is a map, an entity map. It shows relationships. So I mentioned friendly fraud earlier. Not having a graph that knew that Karen has two sons, or that I have two sons, means that if one of them makes a purchase, it's not going to flag as part of the family, right? But a graph would identify that and would help to eliminate the friendly fraud and the disputes that arise from that. So as an example, so taking technologies like a graph neural net and injecting it into the current workflow is one of the things we've done. We announced that at Money 2020 in Vegas last year. And it's important to know that graph neural nets aren't necessarily as performant as a machine learning model, an XGBoost machine learning model. And again, I mentioned you have a second and a half to authorize this transaction. You can't add latency to the process. You've got 20 to 30 milliseconds to do this score. So for the average bank, taking this workflow that we announced, taking this technology, creating a graph neural net, embedding in those features, that intelligence into your training process, and then using that improved model to monitor transactions and track fraud is probably going to give you up to 10 to 15%. Your mileage will vary. Improvement in reducing false positives. But what we're going to announce, sneak preview, this week at Money 2020 in Amsterdam, Europe, at Money 2020 Europe, is an actual deep learning based workflow. So it's an entire workflow based on graph neural nets. And if a bank has a lot of data, and most do, but a lot of data, all right, a lot of data. Essentially,
and Malcolm, I wanted to call out that fantastic partnership there, right? Because our teams have been working together for a number of months, kind of building this together. So making it really easy for customers to get access to synthetic data that can work off historic transactions, compiling that on the NVIDIA chips on AWS, making it really easy to access those models on Bedrock. I mean, that's some of the work that the teams did together. Today we can turn up at a customer and showcase this as a live demo, simulate that with real data, extend that with synthetics, right? All of that is possible. So it's been a fantastic exercise. Just wanted to call that out between your team.
No, good.
And our
all I was going to say is that we're announcing this week an even better model, a better workflow to help detect fraud. So to your point, we're continually working together to improve the tools that banks have, card issuing banks have, to fight fraud. And I would call out that we've worked together with a neobank in Europe named Bank. They are, I think they call themselves the Bank of the Free. They actually are training their models 100 times faster now. Why is that important? They're not only getting smarter, but they're training them more frequently so that these models are able to detect fraudulent patterns faster and more accurately. And they've been able to reduce their false positives by 2.5x. That's 2.5x. So there's a real opportunity here to reduce loss.
And I think that hits on a key point in that you're always thinking about how can I retrain faster and at the same cost or lesser cost, which is a big component of how do I make sure that I'm more accurate, but not hitting the bottom line. And then the second thing is I think that you've done a really good job of describing is being able to do inference at the scale of the velocity of the actual transactions that are coming in. So optimizing for that latency is also a key differentiator and something that our customers are always asking for when we're having these types of conversations. So the partnership with NVIDIA in responding to working backwards from what customers need with that ultra low latency inference and the ability to train quickly, more frequently, and the business benefit of doing so, I think is a really great way of framing this. And I have to say, I apologize that this half hour went so fast, Malcolm.
It did.
We have maybe let's take 1 minute of recap. What do you want to make sure that our audience takes away from today?
I think if you're a card issuing bank or you are a merchant that offers credit to your clients, you absolutely should be engaged, reaching out to AWS and NVIDIA and speaking with our experts. We can help you improve the fight against fraud and get on the offensive and take the fight back to them and save and reduce the losses you're experiencing today. That I think is the biggest takeaway for your audience. And it's been great to be here.
We appreciate your coming on and sharing your insights. I think that is really important for all of us to be thinking about if you're having challenges, if your business is faced with how can I reduce fraud, ensure that I'm increasing customer loyalty, and I can do that as quickly as I possibly can. Partnership is the right way to think about that. So great call out, Malcolm. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on Industries Live today.
Great. Glad I was able to make this happen, and it's great to be here. I hope your audience benefited.
Awesome. Thanks, Malcolm.
Bye-bye.
See ya. All right. That was fantastic, Addy. Quick recap from you. What were the things that you heard that differentiated NVIDIA?
Yeah, I was super excited about this session because it really called out the heavy investments we're making together as NVIDIA and AWS towards transforming financial services. We've put in that investment, we've got those ready plays, and we have the customer references coming together. But this is an opportunity for our consulting and technology partners to build on top. So, what is it that you as an audience would like to develop, whether you're a developer, an engineer and building, if you're a CXO professional and looking to prototype these solutions, I think we have these ready and we're willing to invest. So I think it was really good to have Malcolm kind of articulate the history and how this has all come together. But we're really excited to get out there and show this to our mutual customers. So this was excellent.
Awesome. All right, stick with us, folks. We are transitioning partners, and we'll be back in 30 seconds with Quantify.